Good evening and welcome to Driving and Dragons. This is Daniel, and I appreciate you stopping by to check out yet another D&D Reacts video. Now, before we get down to business, go ahead and touch base on a couple of things. One, if there's some background noise, more than I normally do, just being kind of a klutz, got booms outside, maybe some noise from my young companion here, Mr. Lucas. And that is because I am recording this on the 4th of July, telling a happy 250th birthday to the United States. But that also means a lot of fireworks. So you may hear some booms and my dog making sure he is inside and safe, as you should on holidays like that, so that he does not run off and get run over or lost or anything like that. So please give me a little grace on some of the background noise. Same thing if I sound like I have a frog in my throat or if I cough a little bit. I'm not exactly feeling the best right now. So if that comes up, I'm going to try my best to keep it under control. But that's happening if it messes up any of this audio. I hope it's not too bad. Anyway, let's do a couple of announcements real quick before we get cracking. I plan on doing 2 D&D Reacts videos this week. This one, and then one to Seth Skorkowski. But, just out of common courtesy, I want to give the Seth Skorkowski video some time to sit on YouTube before I go in there and do my reaction to it. I'm not under any illusions that me doing an early reaction is going to somehow cannibalize viewership from his, but it's just common courtesy to let a video sit a little while before you do a reaction to it. It's just the right and proper thing to do. And I do really like Seth's channel, so I don't want to be a dick towards him in that regard. Anyway, and that actually will probably be a pretty positive reaction if I know my general tenor towards Seth Skorkowski videos. We've also got the next in the 7 keys to effective TTRPG design this week. And that is going to be fantastic because it's think first in settings, then in systems. It's the first one that really is a deep dive into the actual process of designing a game and less about general setting yourself up for success, proper knowledge base before you start type things. So be on the lookout for that. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get cracking here. We are looking today at a channel called Roll Initiative. I am so completely shocked that with the big dungeon tuber boom that has happened, that it took this long for somebody to name a channel Roll Initiative. That's really kind of shocking to me, but that's kind of what happened. Roll Initiative is a relatively new channel. It is roughly the size of my own, about 900 subs. It is very much in the vein of like general, basic, I would say very much beginner D&D advice. And it is really heavily D&D advice. And it's kind of shocking because the common wisdom right now is that kind of video is dead. That kind of video is no longer something that we deal with or has any success because it's been done to death. And the most recent generation of gamers have already joined the hobby. We've already hit the peak and we're headed into the valley of, in our cycle of TTRPG player bases. So we'll see what happens here. I've seen a few of her videos. I haven't seen anything that's like utterly offensive yet in terms of just bad advice or modern gamer nonsense, but let's see what she has to say, because this video that she has is called Things That You Shouldn't Do as a DM. And we're going to find out what she thinks you shouldn't do. Things you should never do as a DM. So let's bring that on and get cracking.
Hi everyone, I'm Brianna and welcome to Roll Initiative. And today we're going to be looking at a bit of a list that I put together of things that you really shouldn't do if you're a dungeon master. So let's get started. Okay, so this first one is just to never have an NPC that you try and treat like the main character. If you even try and treat your NPC like a player, that's going to be very difficult and it doesn't usually work out well. DMs can't really enjoy being a player at the same time that they're DMing. If you really want to be a player, ask if one of your players would mind DMing a one shot to give you a break, but you really can't use an NPC as your character. NPCs are there to make the game more fun for the players. And especially since you pretty much have control of the whole world, don't you think you're going to have a bit of favor towards your NPC or your character? Now, most DMs that have DMPCs probably aren't going to listen to this anyway, and that's fine. You play the game how you want. This is more for DMs who maybe don't realize what they're doing, but they have this really cool NPC they love who joined the party, and now you've pretty much got a character. It's just a bit of a warning. Be careful with this. Don't try and make the NPC your character, and never make them the main character. Your NPC, even if you play with DM NPCs and that's just how you like to play, don't make them the main character. The game is for your players. You have fun running the game. Your players are going to have fun playing it. If you make your NPC the main character, that's going to take away from their experience.
Okay, so we kick off with a piece of advice about not making an NPC the main character. There's a couple of things that are okay here. A couple really tip her hand and show a lot of her inexperience. She talks about how a DM really can't enjoy that and really can't be part of a uh, part of the group and can't really be a player too and that sort of thing. And they really can, depending on your play style. Especially if you're running like a zero prep style game where or the more random your game is, the easier it is. You could very easily sit around and say, "Hey guys, we're going to play D&D, for instance, and we're going to play like a totally off the rails gonzo no prep table rolled game. Everything that happens is going to be rolled randomly on tables. I'm going to do the rolling. I'm going to handle it as the game master, but I'm also going to be a player that's involved. Part of this is going to be that I don't know what's going on any more than you do because everything's going to be randomized. There's not going to be anything to it. And that can work. You can also run the multiple player or multiple dungeon master style campaign or a West Marches style campaign. Though, to be perfectly fair, that's really me using an outside example that's not really addressing her point as kind of an unfair argument. Well, what if we do West Marches and do the style of adventuring where you always have to finish the adventure in the session and be back at the keep, and then there can be a bunch of different DMs, and you just pick up your player and you leave the keep on the next mission. Okay, yeah, we get it. That definitely sits on the side. That's, like I said, that's kind of an unfair thing to bring up. But where she's kind of off base here. First off, oh, you're going to have favoritism towards your own character. That's not necessarily true. If you are a mature player, it is you should be able to perfectly capable of cutting yourself off and basically saying my character is essentially deaf and mute. Like he'll do things, he will say things for the party, but he's not going, you're basically being mature enough to not use any meta knowledge. Where she really messes up, though, is in the framing of this advice. This is what I would call very immature DM advice, and not immature like, fart jokes or something like that. Immature in the fact that she has not matured as a game master yet. The experience is not there. And that is, it's not don't make your NPC the main character. It's not don't have your DMPC in here as a main character because that's going to do stuff to the players. Nobody should be a main character in a tabletop role playing game unless you happen to have a solo game where it's one DM and one player. Okay. The main character is determined by the actions of the players and how they move throughout the narrative, even in a very narrative style. Even if you are in a very narrative style, even a very linear narrative style, it's the players' actions and yes, even the results of a lot of roles that are going to determine who is the quote unquote main character, if there is in fact a main character. So overall, the advice is pretty decent for your rookie GM, your rookie DM, where it's like we're all going to play Dungeons and Dragons, we're all excited, and I'm going to be the game master, but can't I have a character too? It's There's some good guardrails there, but like I said, very immature advice that has its positives and negatives.
And one of the things that I am perhaps the most passionate about is never tell your players how their characters feel or what they think. Their character is perhaps the only thing that they have full control over in the game. And if you take that away from them in pretty much any measure, it feels like you're taking away the only agency they really have in the game. It's the only thing that really belongs to them. So I'd suggest leaving it well enough alone, especially when it comes to their character's mind. Unless you have talked to your players or there is something else going on, such as like magical influence, you should not be telling your players how their characters feel or think. You should also try to not fudge dice.
Okay, so her transitions are not the smoothest in the universe here. Looks like the next one's probably going to be dice fudging, guys. Anyway, taking a look at this, not telling characters what they think or players what their characters think and feel. This is another one of those immature advice. Now, I am very glad that she added a piece at the end and she's almost fully corrected it. She's about 99% correct. Generally, you should not tell characters what they think or feel, other than to tell them that, for instance, if they fail a spot, or if they say they want to search a room, you can say you don't find anything, or you feel the room's empty. You could say, "Oh, I'm going to listen." It's like you don't hear anything on the other side of the door, or you don't think anything's there. I'm going to listen for monsters. Like you don't think anything's on the other side of the room. That kind of thing is fine. And obviously, there's also magical compulsion, which she mentioned, but really any kind of failed save. If you have a failed save against a particular kind of emotion, then yes, it's like if I fail a fear check, it's like you are terrified and you are running everywhere. It's like this terrifies you. Now, what you should not do is dictate how they behave with those feelings, dictate the way their character chooses to express them. It is perfectly acceptable, like even on an opposed roll, if an NPC happens to make a bluff check or a persuade check or something of that nature and succeed, it's perfectly acceptable to say, you think they're being truthful and honest. This is not taking over the character's thoughts. This is playing out the results of the dice and the results of the game. But as a general rule of thumb, you should allow your characters, player agency is agency over their character. And just like they shouldn't be expanding into agency over the world, you shouldn't be expanding into agency over their character. So let's see what she has to say about dice fudging.
Or cheat or lie about any of the game mechanics. And especially if you're using this against the players, you should never be trying to beat your players. You're running the game for them. You're supposed to be their guide. It's not DM versus players, and that is incredibly important to remember. Some DMs only really see the memes and I will drink the tears of my players, and they might not really understand this. But it is really, really important to remember that you're on your player's side. You want them to be cool and to have fun. And this sort of attitude alone can greatly influence your game. If you've got an antagonistic attitude towards your players, they're probably not going to have much fun. Whereas if you want them to succeed, even if things go wrong, you're on their side and you're helping them. And they're probably going to have a lot more fun, and the game is going to feel much more friendly overall. And
Okay. So this is far and away, thus far, her worst segment. And it comes from an okay place. For one, there's a lot of things that are conflated here. For instance, fudging dice. What she's all the only thing she's talking about is fudging dice against the player characters. And there's times to do that, there's times not to do that. As a matter of fact, we all know my thoughts on dice fudging, but even somebody who is pro dice fudging like myself says that it should be extremely rare. Dice fudging is there to make a minute correction in the ultimate chaos of the game. It is to make small adjustments to eliminate certain extreme rare, deeply unsatisfying, extremely rare circumstances. In my current Oriental Adventures campaign, I don't think I've fudged dice a single time, and it's going on over a year now. Okay, so when I say I'm pro dice fudging, I typically fudge dice like once, maybe twice every couple of years, and only in very, very extreme circumstances. But dice fudging aside, she's talking about the player versus DM thing, and she said one of the things that is absolutely toxic in the modern player mentality. You're there to guide your players through and to be. No, you are not. You are absolutely not there to guide your players through the world, guide your players through the game, guide your players through the narrative. No, you are not. As a game master, you are there to run the world. Yes, you may have a narrative structure that is set up saying that this is what these NPCs are doing, this is what's happening in these nations, etc., etc. However, you are running the world. If the players do something that would rationally make one of your villain characters or whatever change their, what they're doing, then you would change that. So as the game master, you are there to run the world. That's it. And that is your playing of the game, is creating the world and running it, creating the narrative and running it. But you are not there to guide, handhold, maneuver. You're not there to weight things for the player or against the player. Where she's correct is no, you do not want to be adversarial. There is, despite what the Bro SR likes to say, there is no winning in Dungeons and Dragons. There's losing. There's plenty of losing. You can lose when you do stupid stuff like become incredibly adversarial. And for the same reason you don't want to see Prime Mike Tyson box a toddler, you don't want to see the GM go after the players. It's brutally one-sided and unfair. It's not satisfying for anyone. So there's a small piece of good advice in there, especially for your rookie, low-level, I just started playing type game masters. But she's dancing in some very, very bad territory for some very bad premises with that one.
While we're on the topic of DMs and players, you should also never favor any players above others. So maybe you're really good friends with one player and you barely know another. You should treat them the same in-game. You can't treat one player better than the other. And all rules should apply to all players, unless it's something in their character's stats. You should never have one rule for one player and another rule for another player. The DM needs to be impartial between the players. And if you don't think you can do that with the players at your table, then you need to talk to some of them and figure out what's sort of wrong here. Because you need to be impartial to your players. You need to treat them all the same. It's not going to be fun for any players if they think there's favoritism going on at the table. It is not going to be fun for your players if they see you doing this, because that means that you're going to treat them differently depending on how you feel about them. If you favor some players over others, it's going to ruin the trust and respect that your players have for you.
This is another case of partially good advice that's coming from the right place, but is what I would also refer to as immature advice. As a general rule, she's right. Don't show favoritism towards your player, to an individual player, especially not based off of like your personal feelings. Like, this is my best friend, the classic, this is my wife, this is my husband or whatever that's at the table. This is my girlfriend who's at the table. you don't want to, that should never factor into anything. You should also not be making any other amends to cater towards a player, like intentionally catering towards them to gin them up more powerful. Or, like I said, warning in the earlier piece of advice, you don't want to make any player a main character for a number of different reasons. You want that to kind of naturally emerge. However, there are times where you need to show some favoritism. There are times where you need to favor another player and not have it based on like stats. So let's give one thing. Sometimes you have an adventure that highlights one character's abilities over the others. As they say, give them their spotlight time. Or you have a part of an adventure that highlights one character or another. That's a form of showing favoritism. Sometimes you show favoritism towards the characters. Let's face it. Let's take some out of game stuff here. The character who doesn't show up on a regular basis, or the character who tends to be less prepared, who doesn't know their character all that well. You don't put a lot of the impetus for things on that player. When you got the wizard who has to take 45 minutes to look up a spell and never has his spell list together or anything, you push him back to where he's the combat wizard. Okay? Because you favor the other players in a lot of the other interactions. You favor them in some of the things you give them and in the way you design things, because you have to compensate for that player screwing up the game for everyone else by only showing up half the time, or not paying attention, or not understanding how all their stuff works. We've all had that player. And sometimes it's a friend that you don't want to be like, hey, I'm going to throw you out of the group. They're great and all, but just stuff happens, even if it's not their fault. If I've got a guy who can only periodically be there because of work, and you usually don't know until a day or two before that he's going to be there or not be there, I'm not going to put a lot of stuff in the game that is ginned up or that is geared around his character. I'm just not going to do it. And I'm going to show a little bit more favoritism in terms of loot, in terms of situations, to the other players. So there are situations where showing a little favoritism in game is smart. However, you also need to be very careful that that favoritism is not overt, is not obvious, and is not something that actively sets that player above the others.
You should also be really careful when you roll the dice. Only roll the dice when you're okay with it being a failure. If you, as the DM, can't really accept a failure in a certain circumstance, then you shouldn't ask for a roll. Or if there's no reasonable explanation why the character might fail, then you shouldn't ask for a roll. If they fail at something that they shouldn't really have trouble with, then that's not going to look good for them. And the player's probably not going to feel great about that. So being careful when you roll the dice is also very important. Some people just really like to roll dice. It's a common thing, but you still have to be careful when you roll them. Now,
Okay. This is another place where she has stumbled. This is another immature game master thing. See, it's coming from a good place. There are some good pieces in there. However, there are also some very bad things in there. Gary Gygax himself said that sometimes you should just randomly roll the dice behind the screen to make the players think you're doing something. And yeah, there are times where you should have a die roll that doesn't matter, where you're like, well, don't do a roll if failure is not a possibility. It's like, no, you still have them roll, because a lot of times you want to keep the characters from thinking that every time there is a roll, there is a chance for failure. Or every time there is you shouldn't have a roll that counts, really. In a lot of those cases, there should be some sort of complication for it, if not an outright failure. It's one of those things that you learn when to do it and when not to do it as a game master, and as you get more experience with not only with playing in general, but with your group in particular. You need to be able to do those kind of things. Once again, I'm going to have to object to some of the language used. if you're not okay or not prepared for a failure, okay with the outcome, as a game master, that's not your place. You should always be okay with the concept of failure. The only time, if they do something and it's going to suck if they fail, they still chose to do it and they still have a chance to fail. The only time that you should consider not having a role at all, there's only 3 situations where you should consider not having a role at all. Failure is either impossible or completely inconsequential. All right, I'm going to pick this lock. I've got all the time in the world. There's nobody here to catch me or anything. I know there's nobody here to catch me. I know I have hours or whatever. I don't need to have a role. I'm just going to take my time, pick the lock. Fine. It's inconsequential because even if I fail, I've got time to try again and again and again. Okay. That's one time you don't have a role. Another time you don't have a role. It's utterly impossible, and you have already communicated to the player that it is utterly impossible. I'm going to jump across the Grand Canyon. No, you're not. You know, you can look and know you cannot make that jump. Well, I'm going to do it anyway. Natural 20. Okay. It's like, I didn't call for a roll. Well, yeah, but I'm going to jump the canyon. So it doesn't matter. If you jump the canyon, you fall in and you take your falling damage. Well, I don't get a roll. No, you don't get a roll. I already told you it's not possible. You know it's not possible. So I don't care what your roll is unless you want to see how far out you get before you fall to your death. Okay. That's a case where you don't call for a roll. And then probably the only other time you wouldn't call for a roll is in a situation like the good old Brendan Lee Mulligan thing that's going on right now, that just recently passed, where the role play effects have negated the need for a role. Now, this is not a reward. This is not I'm rewarding good gameplay. That's not what it is. It is, once again, having a world that is rational. You have created a situation that has moved the difficulty from I need a roll to this is a sure thing. But like I said, you got to be careful with that advice because a lot of what she said in here is not good at all.
The next thing is to leave things that are special or important to your characters alone. If your players have favorite NPCs or items that their characters really care about, don't mess with these. If your player has a book or maybe a ring that is the only thing left that they have of their mother, and maybe their mother got it from their mother, and so on down the line, leave it alone. Please don't take it from them. It's going to really upset your players if they can't have special things or favorite NPCs without worrying that you're going to take it from them. Unless you have specifically talked to your players about this and they have given you the go-ahead on this, don't do it. Leave your players' special things alone. There are plenty of other things they care about that you might be able to mess with. Just leave their special things alone. If they particularly care about something, you shouldn't be targeting that. They're going to emotionally switch off from the game if they think that you're going to take away everything that they like in game.
This is utterly garbage advice. No. Your characters need to be emotionally invested. If they have something special, that should be something that gets factored in. It's not special if it's just, I really like this sword, or, this ring is important to me. Like that. It's one of those things where these are the pieces that get your players invested in your game world via their characters. Oh, there's an NPC that they really like. Good. There's an NPC they really like. So when I need the Goblin Raiders to kidnap somebody, guess who it's going to be? Or if I really need them to hate the bad guy, guess who's getting strung up in the square? Guess who they're going to find twitching hanging from a tree branch somewhere? Oh, it's going to upset your players. Yes, it's going to upset my players. I want it to upset my players. The players, you don't get upset by things that you are not emotionally invested in. And you want that emotional investment. That is its own kind of reward. That is just terrible, terrible game master advice. Now, where I'm going to give her a little grace here and think that she is simply misstating from immaturity as a game master is you shouldn't just arbitrarily screw with their favorite stuff for no reason. Okay. Don't be George R. R. Martin. They like an NPC and you kill them just because they like them. Oh, this bow is their favorite thing in the world. Well, the bad guys who break into the camp, the first thing they do is snap the bow in half. You don't do stupid shit like that. Okay. You don't like if a character has a tattoo that has some kind of meaning for them or something, you don't make sure that the sword blade from the bad guy cuts the tattoo. So now they're emotionally scarred or whatever. You don't do stupid stuff like that. That is where this advice has some merit. Okay. You generally it just goes back to rule -1. Don't be a dick. Rule 0, we know what rule 0 is. What the GM says goes. It's his world and he has control over the rules. But rule 0, that's rule 0. Rule -1 is don't be a dick. So, but other than that, this is just bad advice. You do need to screw around with what's special to your characters because that's what makes your world special to them.
Now, this next thing I'm sure most of you have heard before, which is player agency. Don't railroad your players. If there's a big, important decision coming up, don't try and make the decision for your players or force them down a certain road. Let them decide where they're going and try and build the story around that. You shouldn't try to force your players along. Talk to them about the overall goal of the campaign, and if they like the sound of it, then that's great. And so long as they're pursuing the overall goal of the campaign, they should be able to go wherever they want and do whatever they want as they try to complete that. So long as they're still playing the game and participating in the story, you should let them do it how they want. They're cooperating with your game and your goals, but you need to let them do it their way. That's part of what makes it a collaborative game. You create the world and the story, but your players figure out how they're going to do it. And that's part of the fun. As a DM, sometimes there's nothing better than sitting back and watching your players try and work something out, and watching them plan out what they're going to do next and come up with some really great ideas. So just respect your players' agency and encourage them to make these big decisions that will affect the world. It'll make the game a lot more fun for everyone.
Okay. So it looks like she may have actually saved the best for last here because I do believe that is the best piece of advice she has given so far. And I was terrified when I looked down at the old progress bar on the video and saw that player agency was going to be her next thing because I thought for sure, I'm like, oh my God, here it comes. This is going to be toxic player agency 101. This is going to be allowing their players to be, to have all this additional control over the world. The kind of nonsense that you hear from a lot of like modern players and modern dungeon tubers where agency extends to what happens to their character as opposed to what their character does. But you hit the nail on the head in the way where as long as the player is not being just a bastard and they're breaking rule -1, then yeah, absolutely. You let them do things their way. I don't agree with the whole talk about the goals of the campaign type thing. You outside of saying something along the lines of like, "Hey, we're playing Oriental Adventures," and the dude comes up with something that just doesn't fit. Or like for instance, I've used this example before. I was playing 3.5, and I had a player who's just like, "I want to be a goblin." I'm like, "Well, you can't be a goblin. They're all evil in this world." "Well, I want to be the exception." "There's no exceptions in this world. Player characters are not allowed to be goblins." "Well, why not?" "Well, one, because I said so, I'm the game master. And two, they're wholly evil in this world. You will be smited out of existence by the other players. One of them's a paladin. He will just kill you because you are basically an evil spirit creature, and they're all evil." "Well, now I really want to play one." "Well, now you want to play a different game." Okay. That is that rule -1 thing. If you have the player who comes in, "Well, I want to set up a lemonade stand and set up an arrow shop instead of being an adventurer." It's like, okay, cool. Hand me your character sheet. Now roll your next character. He opened up an arrow shop, or he opened up a Boyer Fletcher, but we're doing dungeon crawl adventure. So you need a character who wants to do dungeon crawl adventure. That is really the extent of grabbing somebody by the nose and forcing things. Player agency, you allow them within the reason of not screwing up things for everyone else at the table. You allow them to do whatever the hell they want to and let the consequences fall where they may. And that includes up to, oh, I'm just going to ignore the story. We've decided we don't care about this. It's like, okay, maybe there's a couple of ways to handle that. One of which may very well be, it's like, man, why is nothing ever happening? This is such a boring world. Why is there nothing happening in this game? It's like, well, because you ignored all the things going on in it, and in lieu of walking off to nowhere, nothing was happening over there, and that's where you went. But she did a great job with player agency, and I think far and away that's the one she's done the best so far. Let's see if she's got anything else here in the end, and then we'll close up ourselves.
But there we go. That's the end of this video, and I really hope you enjoyed it and that it was helpful. And if you have anything that you think DMs should never do, that you
okay, so yeah, she's just gonna go, join in the comments, etc., etc., etc. Which you guys should do too. You should leave stuff in the comments below too. Let me know what you think of this. Let me know where I got it right, where I got it wrong. Let me know where you think she got it more wrong or more right than I gave her credit for. Let me know what you think about that channel. And if you would like me to react to more of her stuff. Some other things, while you're here, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff down there. And remember, guys, it is White Dwarf Summer over with Patty at Patty's Parlor. He is helping raise money for preborn and got some pretty cool stuff over there. I'm going to clip the picture of him standing in just his Hawaiian shirt out in the middle of the water, and I'm going to make every last one of you guys have to see that because it burned my eyes, so it's going to have to burn yours. That will be his new White Dwarf Summer ad coming up. Once again, he does not pay me for any of this. It's just good stuff, so go support. And while you're at it, grab yourself a copy of Corvid Codex Volume 1 on Lulu. Links in the description below and up top in the little pop-out card thing. And be here, guys. Look for what I got coming up this week. Got a lot of great stuff, and I will see you next time.